Well, hello. It's really wonderful to see so many familiar faces and some new faces out this evening. I want to give a welcome to everyone here. My name is Rachel Storm. I serve as the City of Urbana's Arts and Culture Coordinator, and it's my, okay, thank you. It's my privilege to welcome you to tonight's Red Herring Poets celebration. This is made possible, of course, first and foremost by our inaugural Poet Laureate, now Poet Laureate Emeritus, Will Rieger. And it's also made possible by Channing Murray Foundation, in which we are standing right now in their chapel, also home to the Red Herring Poets for many years, the Urbana Free Library, the Champaign Public Library, and the Writers of Oya. Let's give them a round of applause. I also want to acknowledge some others that helped made this possible. That's Steve Davenport, Ann Hart, Charlotte Greenwood, Elaine Palencia, and Catherine Kerr. Please give them a round of applause. So this evening, you're going to see a wonderful variety of artworks and poems that interpret the poetry from our Red Herring poets. But before we do, I want to give a few housekeeping announcements to us all. So you are here at the Channing Murray Chapel. If you need to use the restroom, they are located downstairs in the Red Herring restaurant that's beneath us. If you would like a glass of water, we have some water set out in what we call the fireside room. That's right over here. Please welcome yourself to any water. And I also want to mention that the Matrix, which is the zine poetry chapbook that was put out by the Red Herring Poets over a number of years, has copies available for sale here this evening. So a lot of the artworks and the poetry that you're hearing tonight come direct from those zines, and we encourage you to support Channing Murray Foundation and its Red Herring Restaurant through the purchase of those copies if you're interested. Each one is $5, and the money directly supports the Channing Murray Foundation. Next, I want to mention that this program is made possible by an Urbana Arts and Culture grant, and I have to ask a show of hands of how many of you are familiar with the Urbana Arts and Culture program. Oh, that's lovely. Now, for those of you whose hands are not raised, I want to tell you the Urbana Arts and Culture program helps make possible lots of different public arts initiatives throughout town. We also, of course, launched the Poet Laureate program, and we have not one but two Poet Laureates in the room. So I also want to acknowledge our Poet Laureate, Ashanti Files, who's with us this evening. And of course, I know so many of you as fantastic poets yourselves, and I encourage you to apply to be our Poet Laureate as well. We are also in the process of launching our Youth Poet Laureate position for the City of Urbana. And yes, it's very exciting. Thank you. The deadline is actually this Sunday, so if you know anyone who is applying or in the age bracket of 13 to 18 years old and could be a fantastic Youth Poet Laureate, please encourage them to submit our simple online application so that we can also consider them for the position. Last but not least, I need to mention that Urbana Arts Grants made this event possible, and Urbana Arts Grants are ways that the City of Urbana's Arts and Culture program directly funds local artists and local arts organizations, local artists just like Will Rieger, who made this event possible. So if you are interested in applying for an Urbana Arts Grant, now's your chance. We do have our application portal open now until January 16th of 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. All that jazz. I encourage you to apply. You can find an application right online. We've finally gone mostly electronic, although if you do need a paper version for whatever reason, we can accommodate that. So do get in touch with me. I offer grant workshops and one-on-one grant support, and it makes so many wonderful programs just like this one possible. So we hope that you, too, take an idea that you have, one that also commemorates Urbana's local and multicultural traditions, its histories of things like our Red Herring Poets, and actually make that possible through our grant program. Without further ado, I want to welcome Will Rieger, who's going to talk a little bit more about this project.
Thank you, Rachel. I have to say it warms my heart to see you all here and to acknowledge by your presence that you value the literary history of this town and the people who for years spent time laying it out on the line for themselves. The story begins right after we built the new library over in Champaign. I spent a lot of time in that library. I was in graduate school for years, and so I wrote, whatever, and I would peruse the poetry shelves, and I'd always come across this little run of rather scrappy, tattered-looking volumes of the journal Matrix. And I thought to myself, what is this? And as I looked into it more, I realized this was a group of people here in our community, both academics and non-academics, coming together to write poetry. And they maintained it. This is the amazing thing. They maintained their group from 1974 to 2009, which I think is a tremendous run for a poetry group. And so I made the effort to start putting together all the copies or all of the volumes of this Matrix journal. And I thought to myself, what is it that we have here? What can we do with this very important piece of our history, our literary history? And so I've had a lot of ideas. This is the one that came to fruition, and I'm grateful for your support. What you're going to see tonight is individual efforts in various media to try to make the red herring poets current, somehow bring it into our present in some way. So many of the poems written by this group are, very rooted in the early part of the 20th century. But as they move forward, the poems become different. They change in their tone. So, for example, the group began in 1974 and published a number of volumes. By 1982, the 7th volume was edited by Kurt Leland, and all throughout these early volumes, more or less, the tenor of the commentary by editors goes like this. These are poets moved by the determination which drives a room full of divergent interests, each given by equally various speakers to turn life into words. What are those words? What was that life? A year or two later, Catherine Kerr and Michael T. Spooner edited volume 8, I guess. They wrote that the poets back in the day, they're already 10 years past the beginning, the poets at that time wanted a matrix within which the work of member poets might improve. And there are other comments in other editorial paragraphs throughout the series that sort of echo that theme. A desire to serve the community, a desire to serve or increase their own talents. And that, I think, is a fairly positive message. But when the group gets older, we get into the 2000s, there's a very clear, distinct change in what the poets are concerned with. They talk about there being more conflict going on in our lives. We are in a state of heightened conflict. We are all lost in a world we did not truly understand. It is the job of the poet to guide us through the darkness. The poet simply understands us the best because he is the most like us. I think those are very important words. We still sort of live in that time of conflict that didn't exist in the halcyon days when this group began. But the idea of a group of poets getting together and meeting is still alive in our town. We have several groups around town in Champaign-Urbana that meet as groups to pursue this goal of improved writing, as well as maybe a sharper consciousness of what's going on around us. And so I think we celebrate that spirit here tonight, and the efforts of artists and musicians to pay homage to these poets, I think, is a valuable thing, a thing that should be part of our literary life in our community. So I thank you all for coming and giving your attention to us, and I hope it goes well. Tonight we celebrated a group called the Red Herring Poets. It was a poetry group associated with the Red Herring Restaurant and the Channing Murray Foundation. And this particular group lasted from 1974 to 2009. The project began as an idea of making this group reconnect, I guess, with the community. And so I wrote the grant in those terms so that it would be something that the community would be able to benefit from. Actually, truthfully, my ideas for that grant were 3 times larger than what actually was funded. So I have other projects I'd like to accomplish with this group in the public eye. But I'm happy that the video that we're making will be available to schools and libraries in the area. And so maybe my next stage or phase will be to develop some educational materials based on local poets. I'd also like to see if the Early American Museum would be interested in putting up a display of the Red Herring Poets Society and looking at some of the people involved and the poems that were put together. I think there's a tremendous value for the community in looking back at its in this case literary history and trying to get a sense of who we were as we move forward in time. So that's really why I wanted this to be an interpretive thing, so that people could say, okay, well, the poet in 1978 said this about cornfields. What will I say, all these years later? So I think that was definitely something that came through in our presentation tonight. I don't know if individuals necessarily had any knowledge or pre-knowledge about the Red Herring Poets, but I think that in the advertising of this event, people felt like, oh, here's something that is valuable because it's part of our past. And maybe that's my assumption, I don't know, but the thing I enjoy this evening is having such a large crowd be interested in coming and in participating in this event. I think that I've been involved in some poetry events over the last 10 years here in town, and this was by far the largest audience I've ever experienced. We had about 50 people tonight. So I want to give you a sense of what's coming. We're going to begin with some poetry readings from the Files family, Ryan and his daughter, Kayla. And then we will hear a reading of some of the Red Herring poets. And then we were going to have a dance, but that has been canceled. And then we'll go back to the vocal interpretation at that stage, I believe, if our singer is here. Ah, she's here. Great. Excellent. And then we'll end with a final poetry reading of the Red Herring Poets and a interpretive reading from Danielle Chenoweth. And then we'll view some art, and you can see it's on the screen here as well. So that's where we're headed, and we'll begin with our friend Ryan Files.
Hello. Thank you very much. My name is Ryan Files. Kayla stepped out for a second. So my inspiration for my poem is a poem by Maureen Pern called Cornland. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start off reading her poem and then move on and then read my poem and then see if you can pick out some similarities and what kind of inspired me. This is called Cornland. Ruler straight, pencil thin, reams stretching far and wide. Only the black crow knows where one field ends and another begins, and the farmer who tills and sows from break of dawn to sliding sun. Up with the crow of red rooster, the cackle of hens and low moan of jerseys, surveying spring's black wet fields, yearning from silo to silo for green sprouts. Pencil thin, ruler straight corn, when tassels wave yellow in the sun. Full grown, who can measure the bounty on the flat table land? The fields turn white under the snow, red barns worn red clapboards, turn bright as a cardinal in the window, the lamp oil burns low. Until spring, when fields, yearning from silo to silo, are tilled rich black, under a prairie sky cushioned with rolling clouds that break rain and then filter a yellow sun, green sprouts hoping to make knee-high by the 4th. When tassels wave yellow, who can measure the bounty on the table land, Illinois, Illinois, cornland for miles. It's by Maureen Pern. This is called Cornland 2020. Sweltering, sticky, steamy sweat drips from faces, from surgical masks, a rainbow of hues and humanity searching for truth. Fists are raised, yet voices echo higher, yelling for progress, yearning for change, as the road's hellish heat melts shoes and sandals alike. Bodies press closely, singing in collaborative cadence, say their names, whose life really matters. Only the black crow knows as revolution builds in this cornland town. The crowd suddenly stops. Silence echoes across the masses. Then, in unison, all kneel into pavement, flesh burning and searing in remembrance of loss. 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Tears evaporate in the high noon heat. Illinois, Illinois, we will march for miles until justice is finally won. Thank you.
My name is Ryan Files. So my art is poetry. I have been inspired by a poem called Cornland from an artist named Maureen Pern. And my poem is called Cornland 2020. It basically takes the imagery that Maureen did really and how it embodies Central Illinois, especially this town, Champaign-Urbana. And I just made it a little bit more current to the times of 2020. Maureen's poem, Cornland, used a lot of imagery. Things like the red barn and the reaction to the feel of the corn, the sound of the crowing rooster. Those are moments that kind of pull you into the poem itself. And so what I was trying to do with my poem is really take that inspiration and then in my poem really talk about the protests that we had in 2020 about Black Lives Matter in the Champaign-Urbana community, really specific to this town and this area. I was a part of that protest back in 2020. And it was very hot that day, and I really wanted to give that imagery of how hot it was, how the sun was beating down on us, how shoes and sandals were melting into the asphalt, and when everyone knelt, how that letting the ground sear into your flesh, really understanding the pain and struggle of the moment, as well as the imagery of everything that was surrounding it at the time. When you read different poems, sometimes something just grabs you. The interesting thing about that poem for me was Cornland, the way that the name of the poem, the way it just grabbed me with that title, and then showing how this town originally was about farming. It's a farming community. It still is a farming community. We have the university that is kind of the pillar of the community, but really as the townsfolk, and when I was a student, we called them townies, and now I'm a townie. And what that used to mean here, and the history, the rich history of that, and how we've grown from that. Now we are a city. Essentially, now we're a bustling system, and that the things that go along with that, you have different cultures, different peoples, different religions, different things that really coalesce into a bustling area. And there was conflict here. A group of folks, rose up and said that our lives matter too. And so I was trying to take the past and kind of just marry it with the present a little bit in that poem. I really didn't have trouble with the taking a lot of the imagery into my poem, a lot of the sense from the poem, but really trying to take something such as like a farming poem and really kind of take lines from that and put it into something present was tough. So I put a little spin on it. There's a line that only the black crow knows. I took that line and put it into my poem. There's a lot of imagery with crow, such as Jim Crow segregation, Jim Crow laws, also the crow and it being a scavenger, and also the imagery of the crow being black. There are a lot of different things you could take from that, different multi-layered portions that go along with that line. So that's why I took that line and spun something with it. But I also wanted to tie it back with the Illinois portion, because it is still the same community. It's grown and it's changed and it's different, but we are, as Will spoke of, we're built on our ancestors, and those ancestors came from a lot of different walks of life, but they're a part of us and a part of our community today. I've had to learn a lot about farming coming here from a non-farming community, and just seeing how well Maureen took the process of what that entails, and really pulling the reader in and showing the reader exactly what it takes and what someone goes through on a daily basis to make sure that, it goes from season to season, right? It starts in the spring, goes to summer, fall, and winter. You're really pulled throughout the entire year of what it takes to harvest a crop. And then taking that, kind of moment in time, those moments in time and that particular situation, and then expanding it into the entire community. It's something that I found really special and really intriguing about the poem. It's interesting, right? You go back and you kind of read and you read the inspirational poem to try to dig out what you're trying to get out of your poem. And Maureen, I didn't have trouble with that poem on that, because she was so just well thought. Well, she structured things in a well thought out way to really just pull the reader and let them know, like, hey, this is exactly what we're talking about in this moment in time.
Hello? Okay. Hi. Today I'm going to be reading my poem, Caterpillar Poetry. Let me grab it real quick. Okay. I'm just going to start now. The feet tickle me, leaving me laughing with rhymes. The feet go up and down at the same pace every time. It's no competition, the way the words prance to me. The best of the best they are, scarily beautiful as the words merge onto the page. They flutter like butterflies, leaving a sweet taste on my tongue. The words dance as the caterpillars do. I start to think like crazy as I write down the first line.
My name is Kayla Files. The piece that I'm doing is called Caterpillar Poetry, and it's a spoken word piece. I read it and I was like, well, this is really cool, but it's a little bit, I don't know how to say this without sounding like rude. It's kind of like blandish. And I was like, this is good, but like if you were to perform it, it wouldn't be like something you could show like more emotion through. So I wanted to fix it so that it could show like emotion in it. I chose that poem mostly because of the title, actually, because you can make a lot of cool like jokes around caterpillars. So I really thought that would be kind of cool to work with those. So I kind of just like saw the title and I was like, this sounds cool, and then I read it and I was like, let's revamp this. I was kind of challenged to reference it, because when I write my poetry, I normally write it after I'm doing something. Like, I wrote a poem about a time I went to Target, and it was a whole thing. It was like a whole rant. But I wrote it because I was just like hanging out at the store, and I was just like, I'm really inspired to write a poem right now. So it was kind of hard for me to go back and reference that rather than putting my own spin on it. There's so many poets in this like place. It's sort of like fun to get to read out something somebody else wrote that I like worked on. It's sort of like a group project. Like you and this other person plus three or more other people have to come together. You don't know these people, and you got to work together and make an okay project. And it was sort of like, okay, well, I don't know this person, but I'm gonna write this poem, and it's gonna sound terrific. So it sort of helped me like understand how hard it is, but how fun it can be to work with somebody else.
I'll read a little poem from the Red Herring Poet Group. This is by a fellow named Mark Niekamp. It's called Warming Up. Back corner of her apartment, voluptuously entranced by our pastries. Cold eaves of snow lay sleeping, enchanted, like dwarves covered by a veil. My sweetest friend sips hibiscus tea, the Buddha of the kitchen, wiggling her hips, humming as she stirs the pot. She is the healer on a warm Aztec evening, making love in the summer rain, bearing her breasts high to the clouds. I peel a blueberry from the cake, ripe, fragile, secret. Hanging plants eavesdrop on our every word. Her roommate, a plump Renaissance model on leave from her painting. I don't think anyone has chosen this poem. This is a Ruth Walker poem, Mother's Mistake. Anybody did that one? Hope not. She mixed the numbers up, reversed the day, the year a wind-flipped page of memory, making me more mature on paper than in life. So they put me in a cabin with the made-up, menstruating, leg-shaving, hair-curled, bra-filled, boy-bent that summer when I was feeling 2 years younger and still liked girls. This last one I'll read today at this point is by Carmen Percival, Brimmed Hat with Flowers. She is enigmatic, a study in contrasts. They say her hat is full of flowers, ready to spread their petals at the slightest touch. When she walks by, a scent flutters its succulence as a flag waving signals to the bees. Some have whispered in wind's sibilant tone of assignations, the bee's tongue penetrating blossoms, separating petals, and in between this gentle courtship of a prodding tongue, the honey beckons with a fragrance which intoxicates the bee. He is maddened, buzzing, driven to inhale aromas as the transfer from stamen to pistil begins its journey to his sucking parts. Her brim is still heavy with honey. Amongst the wilted petals and the drunken bee, she waits under wind breezes, a face hidden, spreading her fragrance to entice tongue dips and sucking by the bees. Anyway, those were all randomly chosen, so they did seem to have a theme. So now we'll have our vocal piece. This is a piece written by Ralph Lewis, and it will be performed by Shalisa Alexander and Dr. Michael McAndrew.
So I just want to say hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Will, for this opportunity. It was wonderful reading all the different poetry that was being offered to be interpreted. We're doing a song called "Possibility of Routine" that's inspired by Anne Disman Schulman's Migraine. It opens with this line about how she can't afford a ticket to the band that's rehearsing in her head, and that kind of led us to eventually come up with this idea for this song. So I hope you enjoy it, and if you hear a band, I hope it's outside of your head tonight.
Today I will keep my routine. I have work in an hour, a doctor's visit this afternoon. I will cook for myself. I will find the time to read. Each day is full of possibility. This today I woke up in pain. Down the left side of my head, this today I'm going to hold myself together with pills and tape. Maybe I'll make it. It's quite possible I may not come in today. It's either the doctor or work. I grab anything to eat. If I'm lucky, I'll make it down the street to the bus, connect to the other bus, and get across town. Tomorrow I may get to work. Tomorrow I'll make it to the doctor. Tomorrow I want to cook for myself. Give me time to read. Tomorrow
I'm Ralph Lewis, and our medium of collaboration tonight was a song. And we were referencing Anne Disman Schulman's Migraine. Our song is called Possibility of Routine. So I read through the 20 or 30 poems that were offered. Initially, I wasn't clear if this was a setting or an interpretation project. When it became clear that it was an interpretation project, that led me to choose Migraine. It had this beautiful opening imagery, like I talked about in the concert, where this idea of she can't afford a ticket to the band that's playing in her head. And while our song is more about chronic pain and living your life day to day with that sense of doing what you can when you can, what was a big part of that. So I wrote the text for the song that we did tonight, and something that I deliberately chose to do was to put a lot of overt repetition in the text in more of a chiasmic setup, where you wouldn't just see the same setup. It would be more sort of enclosed in and of itself, and this isn't like a Bob Dylan like finger point song, but this is more of like a get a load of this kind of a song, where it's so easy to sort of only look at people who have chronic illness who are so overtly in the hospital and so on. But there's a lot of us who have different underlying conditions that obstruct, everyday life things, that obstruct getting places, make having to choose between important things really difficult. So with this in mind, this is almost like a finger press kind of song, where we're going to keep on pressing it. So that's why there's this strophic quality to the music until the last verse and so on. I loved a bunch of the other ones if I were setting the music. With this one, for me personally, with my health issues, I saw something where I could speak about myself in some way, and not just make it, a diary entry. So I thought that was that was part of why I chose this. At the same time, I wanted something that showed off Shay. Shay is unbelievable, and I've wanted to work with you for years. So sorry to put you on the spot, but I wanted something where, because if you deep YouTube Shay's performances, like even like in high school, you're absolutely killing it.
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, no.
I did my research,
No.
and the idea of finally getting to write with you, even though I've we've gone to concerts together, I've heard you sing, we've worked together and to work together in this mode is really exciting, and you're okay too.
I guess to add to that is that, Rachel really encourages projects working together, and Ralph actually had a good phrase where he said you can only move at the speed of community, and this was something we wanted to jump on. And to add to his text thing, he says he didn't want it to be a diary entry, but it really encapsulated what Ralph has been going through the last couple of months, where finishing a dissertation, finishing a degree, and dealing with all the other things in his life, and moving across the country again from Florida. So this really personified everything, the band in his head, but really in an artistic way in this medium. Learning music has its particular challenges. Shay can definitely speak to that.
Yeah.
But Ralph did his due diligence as composer and giving us things that are possible, things that are comfortable, and I would say more of the challenge would probably be on Ralph's end, just living and breathing this text and trying to put that into music, more or less.
Yeah, something that I guess is a general challenge when you're composing music based on poetry is that we're used to either pop music where there's very clear structured units that repeat very deliberately, or it's an art song where it deliberately follows the kind of ephemeral flow of the text. So sometimes in that situation, it's not that the songs are bad in any means, but if you're trying to just get at one thing, suddenly gets lost in the details. So this was sort of I sometimes when I'm composing, I try to use this phrase of Chekhov's machine gun, the stagecraft of Chekhov's gun of if it's loaded in Act One, it should go off, and and in this case, it's sort of a ramping up of that, where if you're going to use it, actually use the materials that you're embarking with. It's not that you can't change, manipulate, step away from stuff, but the idea of if you're going to do it, do it. This is why when I make chocolate milk, it's a lot more chocolate than milk. But I would like to say that I wouldn't be doing this project the way that I did it if it weren't for my grandma, Betty Lewis. She really loved poetry. Her brother was a poet. Even when Grandma was 90, she would do the poems from her memory, and she'd talk to me about them. She swore to me that she had met Edna St. Vincent Millay, her favorite poet, on a train. Who knows? But she would always do, so poetry was always something that Grandma thought was really special. So part of doing this is also thinking about Grandma too.
So I wouldn't say there was anything challenging vocally, but just being friends with Ralph, knowing his story as a friend and as someone that is a collaborator with him, I wanted to be honest to the text and authentic and bring this to life in a way that was true to Ralph. I just feel like that holds a lot of responsibility. So I just wanted to make sure that I did a good job in honoring his journey, his health journey, in his personal life. And so for him to choose me to collaborate on that with him and Michael, it's just been a wonderful experience. And so, for him to open up to us and allow us to sing on something that's so personal and to bring it to the forefront, I think it's commendable, and he's taking back his own power in doing this today. So I think that's pretty awesome.
It takes a certain kind of bravery to follow that. This is a poem called Burial Place by Stephen Kappas. I believe he was our state poet laureate, wasn't he? Or maybe he tried to be, I don't know. Burial Place. Across the table from me, the young female poet seeks a light for her cigarette. I comply with a match from the book I find on the table. I look at the name on the matchbook of the funeral home from which my father and mother, my aunts and uncles, my grandmother, my first great love were buried. She talks to me of life in the big city, traveling from Texas to Chicago, and points in between. She's like a butterfly, her beauty transient, her spirit a light, while I am heavy as the earth. I was born here and will die here, and be buried from that same funeral home. She may spread her wings and drift off on a cloud, leaving this place behind, but if she dies tomorrow, who will bury her? Here's a poem from a writer named David Bravos called The Rose. The rose is red, Mr. Galamlam said, but upon further examination with the aid of scopes and charts, a second fellow called Sir Sagamore declared, the rose is yellow. Hand me that rose, another cried. The party turned around and spied Dr. Bamazilpuss, who sat and rubbed a tiny pill. The room was still. He spoke. I have construed that this bright rose is many-hued, once white as milk, but now purpureal as a purple cow. How many colors do you have? My rainbow rose of crimson joy. The doctor's dizzy voice of clay seemed dripping away, as Madame Flurpley's voice of scorn gripped the sheen, soft rose of thorn to readily proclaim this motley rose is crystal clear. There is no color here. The true blue rose with crystal tear passed around the room from hand to hand, from head to head, but none could tell the rose was dead. That's a downer. So our final performance today will be a reading by Danielle Chenoweth.
Good evening. Good evening. So, first, thank you to the Channing Murray Foundation, to the Red Herring Poet Society, to Will, and the Public Arts Program. I have been sitting on this stage since 1995, so it was really exciting to come back after COVID. It's been a minute. I wanted to point out that I believe the money goes to the Channing Murray Foundation and that they're asking for donations for an accessible bathroom for this floor. So any money that you can give to the Channing Murray Foundation, I would strongly encourage you to help us, meaning those who love the Channing Murray Foundation. I'm not on the board, but I am a longtime supporter and lover to support that accessible bathroom so that folks can come be here. Thank you, Channing Murray. So I'm going to do a poem that is based on a poem by Ruth S. Walker, called The Mantis. And I wanted to show you a picture of Ruth. She passed away February 16th, 2018. That's a picture of her. Raise your hand if you knew Ruth or had ever met her. Okay, so a lot of folks. She was a friend and a neighbor. I didn't know her very well, except when I was on city council, she sent me a typed poem, the kind of poem that's typed on an old typewriter where you can still see where the letters kind of pressed into the paper, and I still have that poem by her. She was known as the Possum Lady. She was known as the Green Queen. She was the director of the Red Herring Poets. She was a 40-year member of the Audubon Society and a 35-year Meadowbrook gardener. And she used to invite people to see the night blooming cereus, which is this flower on the front. So I mention this because I actually tried to incorporate some of these aspects into the poem. So what I did is I took her poem called The Mantis, and I added things to it. And I tried not to subtract hardly anything. So her poem is embedded in this poem, and then I added pieces. And it's kind of a conversation between Ruth, who is kind of gentle, and me, who is not so gentle. And she, who is grounded in a long picture of history, and me, who is urgent and focused on making change now. So it's called The Green Queen, Mother Mantis, for Ruth as we approach the precipice. Proudly in my garden, this portly queen holds her court. Watch, what was once hers, she will take back. This morning, she is dressed her best in a gown of satin brown, ready to devour the asphalt with long jaws, tearing holes to seed new trees, swaying back and forth in her hypnotic gypsy dance. Give her time, and she will overgrow all of our tangled accomplishments. Skyscrapers, interstate highways, coal-fired power plants, they will all lose their heads, overcome by her mildew ministry. Earlier this summer, she was seen in emerald green as we built our progress upon her back, hopeful of a future without want. But we failed. And now she takes her cue from autumn's rustic hues. She breathes out sighs of danger. Watch out! Fires to the west, floods to the east, winds blowing the skin off the plains. She, imitating rhythms of the wind-blown beans, peels the scalp off this civilization, laying it bloody bare. Stained with cochineal, the tips of her long forelegs grip the collar of every passerby, drawing them within her grasping reach. Watch out, young man. 'Tis like a trap she's set to get you in her grip. She is whispering to you about the end of our man-made world. Your species can no longer sleep, haunted by the spirits of half the world's trees, the fish who compete for ocean with plastic, the glaciers sliding into oblivion. Take care, for if you dare to ignore these, she'll snatch you by the head and feast upon your brains. Ruth, dear Green Queen, you who nurtured the buttery pawpaws, the basement possums, they will remove their coal ash to save our trickle river. Your plot at Meadowbrook, Ruth, feeding our neighbors. The roads are filled with bicycles. Where are the levers of power to shut the pipeline off? Show us. Mother Mantis, the world, your delicate creation, teeters at the precipice. So, fellow insects, I must warn you. If you should spoil the earth's garden, you will meet the wrath of this comely queen. You'd better follow in her footsteps. Approach her with humility. Let her know that you've got her on your mind. We ask for your guidance, Green Queen, divine and true, to build a new society in the wreckage of this old shell. Thank you.
My name is Danielle Chenoweth, and I have a book of poetry. I'm working on my second book of poetry, and I decided to take the poem called The Mantis by Ruth S. Walker, who is a neighbor and a friend of mine. She passed away in 2018, and I basically took her poem and added to it to have a conversation about Mother Nature's response to kind of climate catastrophe. What I did is she wrote a very kind of delicate and full of vowels and consonants and alliteration poem called The Mantis that is really about, be careful because the praying mantis will bite your head off, gentlemen, she's gonna get you. And I have been thinking a lot about Mother Nature's ability to regenerate, that if we would just stop doing what we're doing to cause trouble, that she actually will rebalance the world. And I think about that when I feel really panicked about our ability to have a future, that actually it's pretty simple, we just need to stop, right? And that and that she will take over from there. So I wanted to kind of take that praying mantis, like the watch out message of Ruth Walker's poem, and do a kind of like watch out humanity. You need to be listening to Mother Mantis. I call it Green Queen Mother Mantis. So Green Queen was actually a name given to Ruth Walker. She was called the Possum Lady. She was called the Green Queen. She gardened at Meadowbrook for 35 years, and she was a 40-year member of the Audubon Society. So people really know her as an amazing ecologist. So I kind of named it after that nickname for her. So I wanted to do a poem of Ruth Walker's because I miss her and I really admire her and see her as a kind of a feminist who I stand on the shoulders of as a younger woman, younger than her woman. And I was looking through the poems and there were several by her, but the mantis, actually I had written another poem that included a praying mantis. So initially I was going to combine the two poems, my poem and hers, my poems from this book. And when I started working with her poem, it just, something else came to me. And I decided that actually what was calling to me was the kind of precipice. I mean, right now we're having the climate change conversation in Europe right now, and it just felt so forefront in my mind that I focused on that piece. So I think it worked out, but I probably could have taken any poem in the set and made something of it, because it's really a rich tradition that the Red Herring poets have before us. We're very lucky to have inherited this, this local treasure. Writing poetry during a pandemic as a person who's responding to homelessness in the community. My day job is responding to a lot of poverty and the violence caused by homelessness. And so trying to manage that, being a mom, being a caregiver to other children, and writing a poem. I literally was writing this poem with people crawling on my head. And I think about all the women who have tried to write under those circumstances. We are helpers, we are people who are trying to make change in our communities. So it was challenging, but today, as I was doing my final revision on the poem, because I wanted to give it a polish just before reading it, the children kept asking me for, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, and I was like, shut the door and deal with it. So they did, and they did come tonight to listen to the poetry, and so, we make it happen. We make it happen. I really believe in ancestors and the importance of calling to our ancestors, and I believe that when we make community, like all the people who have been here, who have cleaned this room and have helped keep the Channing Murray Foundation going, and all the Red Herring poets, and all the folks who, have helped make the city of Urbana what it is, they're all still with us. And so what was so great is to remember my friend Ruth. We weren't close friends, but we were acquaintances, and she was my neighbor. And so I felt really close to her as I was working on this poem. And then just tonight I learned that some very good friends of mine, that their father was very much involved with the Red Herring poets as well. And they brought to me a book, that he actually, that he is featured in, where Ruth had drawn the picture. And this is actually a farmer who is the late husband of a friend of mine who was killed on a tractor, actually. And so this is him on a tractor. And then there are 4 poems after his death by essentially his father-in-law, talking about that. And so it was really great to feel like, there are these connections between the poetry, between folks I haven't met before, but have influenced the people who are in my circle. Ruth was a Quaker. My friends were Quakers. I'm part of the Quaker meeting here. And so I just really, we forget that we are from a place, and that there are connections that we have with the people in our place. And I have always found this to be such a beloved and cherished community. There's a reason that many times I have been asked to leave, and I have had houses in different places, but I always root here in this community. This is my home. So this is the night blooming cereus, and this was a flower that Ruth Walker had, that she would, speaking of developing community and neighbors, it blooms once a year in the middle of the night, and it's very fragrant. And she would invite people to come into her house in the middle of the night and to watch this 15-minute phenomenon of this flower blooming, and all of this fragrance filling up the whole space. And I just thought, this is one of those great moments where a person connects with their neighbors around a plant that is so strange and sweet and beautiful. And then there's poetry written about it, and then I can read the poetry decades later and reflect on it and incorporate it into my own poetry. So I love how that's how we weave community together. And I like having a really hyper-local organization like the Red Herring Poets, that I can kind of be part of that tapestry.
Hi, I'm Sheila Perinas. This is my art piece called The Caterpillar. And I used alcohol markers on paper. The poem is called Caterpillar Poetry by Ray Olson. It's about a caterpillar, and it was kind of hypnotizing. It was very rhythmic, just like a caterpillar. And it was about a continuous line, and I was drawn to it because my art style is continuous line. I do a lot of continuous line art, usually of people or musicians in the community, but I mean, it just made so much sense with the caterpillar. So this piece is actually a continuous line. So I did the color first, and then I went over it with a single line, and everything is connecting. And I like that style just because I feel that just kind of like life, everything is connected in a way. So a continuous line feels natural, very natural to me. I felt the poem captured a lot of little tiny elements of a caterpillar in all senses. So that really resonated with me. I also adore caterpillars. I've rescued several monarch caterpillars over the years, and they're just a joy to watch them move, and to see them change into butterflies, and just knowing that one butterfly can make a huge difference in the world. I feel that Champaign-Urbana has a way of preserving a lot of natural spots. So I felt that the caterpillar and nature just connect in that way. So I guess just this whole event really just bringing art together in different forms, in different partnerships. It's just very Champaign-Urbana, I feel. I feel like it's such a disruptive environment where people of all different skills and backgrounds come together, and just like artists and poets, and writers, just they connect all the time here, and I just love it. So I guess in that sense it connects as well. So in many ways, so just the appreciation of nature and the partnerships and community that art brings. So
My name is Basia Latawiec. This piece is called Łono, and it has multiple meanings. In Polish, that means womb. In Hebrew, ono means grief. In Hawaiian, means delicious. In Greek, means your highness. And it's because it's inspired by a poem, Womb, by Heather Winters. It was a mixture of emotions. It was complex. It touched on all the levels of my life, as a mother, as a lover, as a citizen of this world. And it activated me. And in a sense, it's been helpful medium in my healing journey of my trauma. So when I first met with this poem, I was in a little different spot. It was a volatile time, but I was happy. And this poem made me think of motherhood and joy and hope. You know, it was summer. Then as I worked on it, I touched on all the other layers. And I responded to it on so many different layers. You know, I heard songs in my head as I read it. I remembered memories of raising my children. I remembered my family. It was as if we were supposed to be together for a little bit. I actually created 2 pieces. So I didn't bring the old piece with me, unfortunately, but my first piece was in acrylics because that was my first medium that I used to work with. And I did it very fast, and it used many different colors and metallic touch-ups, but it didn't show that permanency of life. It didn't show the different colors and textures that I wanted to show. So I chose oils because oils for me signify permanency. So even though, like, I used a palette knife, I used my fingertips, I used different brushes in order to explain different emotions, different things I have wanted to brought to attention. At first, the poem is shaped like a womb. So it instantly makes you think of biology. I have a bachelor's in biology, so obviously I thought of implantation and pregnancy and all the biological aspects of fusion of cells and all the different processes that happen. And then I thought about the emotions behind it, you know, and how that is beyond just me in itself as an individual, and how the process of womb is of life creation in a womb happens to all of us in the whole world. How we're invited to this world and we are here just for a moment. And we are intertwined. We're all connected. Just like we are to our mother in the womb, we are connected to each other. And if we don't connect properly, like some of these threads, we will die. And we're not supposed to be connected at all times. We're supposed to connect and then go. Maybe connect again, maybe connect somewhere else. And so it made me look from within outside and take a look at all the perspectives at the time we are right now too. How by supporting each other through this tough time right now, we can hopefully go by ourselves and prosper and follow our dreams and overcome any challenges of stormy clouds. And with the thanks of my community, my female community especially, I was able to even start this piece. As I mentioned, I'm in in a healing journey, and with their support and inspiration and the foundation, And I was able to continue on with this piece. And therefore, I wanted to thank, with the finishing touches on this, that community right around me, this local community. I came to States and I started my first job just 2 blocks away from here. So this is the heart epicenter of my beginnings here. And again, I would come and go. And I don't know, it just touches on so many different levels of different communities that I'm from, different cultures that I bring in, that you can think about environmental suicide here. You can think of collective grief. You can think of social injustice. You can think of domestic abuse. You can take it anywhere. Your brain, your heart wants to take you.
Hello, my name is Clara de la Fuente. I did a painting for the poem called Alone in the Sunken Garden, and it's acrylic on canvas. So when I read the poem for the first time, it came to mind it was like a flash of a statue that is in Meadowbrook Park here in Urbana, and it reminded me, I don't know exactly what it was, but the whole concept reminded me of that place. It just came to mind just like that. So I thought about it and said, I need to paint this statue here. So the poem talks a lot about stillness, and a statue actually mentions a statue, and talks about some trees, and how my interpretation of it is kind of how you spend time with yourself, how you stay still, like the statue, to kind of work on your things and your fears, and the things that you want to do in life that sometimes we get too carried out, we don't have time for ourselves, but it's very important, as the poem said at the end, and you grow when you do that. It connected to me because in the last, 3 years or so, I have been spending more time on my own. I've always been an extrovert, but I think things changed a little bit way before the pandemic for me, and I really enjoy these moments of solitude. So I think the fact that the poem took my mind to that time that I used to walk there, and it just kind of connect. It's difficult to know exactly what it was, but I feel like that I was connected to that. The first thing came to me fast, which is what should I paint, because I got the idea from the beginning. But I usually paint landscapes. I don't paint people. So when I did the statue, it's not a person, but you still have to keep proportions and so on. So I was like, oh, I have never painted a human statue, so let's see how the proportions are gonna go. But I eventually bought one of these little mannequins that most of the artists have, and it went pretty well. Just have to spend a little bit of time practicing. But yeah, that's my first statue. This place, it's from our community, that park, and it was funny because a lot of people now during the presentation, they came to me and said, oh, that's the statue, so we get to talk. I think, yeah, when I share it, people recognize it. I got a lot of messages on social media from local people that I have been maybe talking a little bit, and they were like, hey, I know what that is. So that was so nice to kind of reconnect, and they asked me why I was painting that, and I could tell them about the show. So that was really nice. I really like what Will said earlier during the presentation about that artists, we get the opportunity of kind of give a different point of view about things that maybe we don't fully understand. And I think that also has to do with, personal and mental health. A lot of times we go through a lot of things. We have all gone through a big thing, and we don't really, process these things. So it's good that we take the time to reflect, and we create these opportunities that we can create art that, give the audience a different point of view or something to think about.
I should have mentioned this earlier, but there are about 150 poets who've been active in this group. We have the honor of having the two daughters of one of the more prominent, actually counting his wife, two of the more prominent voices in the group. So the daughters of Alex Sawyer. So I do want to thank them, as well as a number of different members of the group who helped me put together what I know about this group, and I'm grateful that I can share it with you today. And I look forward to other opportunities to make this group a visible part of who we are. Thank you.